right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Impacts of COVID-19 on Manufacturing with Patrice Green. My name is Sabrina Marquez. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Grow Manufacturing Initiative. GMI is an association of Northern California manufacturers that work together to solve common industry issues such as recruiting talent, accessing capital, and workforce retention. This is another installment of GMI's monthly webinars made for our North State manufacturers, a joint webinar sponsored by California Manufacturing Technology Consulting. CMTC is a nonprofit, privately held consultant and training organization that works with small to mid-sized manufacturers in providing free technical assistance and programs to increase efficiency. Let us know if you'd be interested in meeting with a CMTC expert. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Patrice Green, Human Resource Expert and Employment Specialist Consultant. Over to you, Patrice.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about the impact of COVID-19 on manufacturing. So many things have taken place since, we've been hit with COVID-19. And COVID-19 has disrupted the operation, manufacturing operations on a massive scale. And it's been quite challenging for manufacturers to assess the impact and the best way to respond quickly. COVID-19 has created a highly volatile demand for certain products, necessities, and an assessment of short-term effects on workforce, the ecosystem, relationships, and network assets. Manufacturers must identify key areas of immediate action to help build greater agility and resilience into its future operations. COVID-19 has had a widespread effect. The pandemic's effect on manufacturing can be seen through the disruption to production and supply chains as goods and commodities in the upstream supply chain have been produced in lower quantities and sometimes not at all in the months since the disease began to spread. It's really impacted our workforce. We have, and manufacturers have to deal with, a high amount of employees being off work because maybe they've been exposed to or have contracted the COVID-19. And so, the workforce, the number of people in the workforce is reduced. Many manufacturers are struggling, just to keep the doors open because of supply chain issues, production issues, staffing issues. I mean, COVID-19 has hit every landscape when it comes to manufacturing. It's hit us in every single area. The economic impact of COVID-19 has primarily hit us in the aversion behavior, which is behavior to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. So most of the economic impact of the virus will be in the aversion behavior, the actions that people take to avoid catching the virus. It should be noted that, you have to have a logical and a proportional response. And as depicted in the figure over here to the left, the aversion behavior comes from three primary sources. The first source is governments imposed bans, like they have stay-at-home orders. You can only eat outside. You can't go to a restaurant and sit down and have a meal. It's really impacted the supply chain because getting product to and from manufacturers has become a challenge. And when the government of China orders factories, China, which is where the U.S. gets a lot of its product, China ordered the factories to shut down, and so essentially, once production shut down in China, it really impacted the e-commerce here in the United States. Firms and institutions, including private schools, take proactive measures to avoid infection. Business closures have, the restaurants have closed down. We've been impacted by that. And it has impacted business decisions. Some businesses have had to go out of business. It's resulted in lost wages for workers because there's a reduced number of workers due to the closures. So as many, not as many people are needed in the workforce. And individuals, reduce trips to the market. So we're not driving as much. We're not traveling as much, we're not getting out there, and we're not spending our money as much. And the number of social activities we're able to participate in has reduced, which impacts manufacturing, the sale of goods. It impacts our whole e-commerce here in the United States. Workplace safety has become a huge priority. Not only did you have, workplace safety based on the OSHA rules, but now COVID-19 has given us a whole new set of rules. And so manufacturers have had to invest heavily in ensuring the safety of its employees. So we've had to establish and implement protocols for when employees test positive for COVID-19. And the state of California has a certain steps that you have to follow, and employees have to be given X amount of time off, minimum 2 weeks, if they've either been exposed to or contracted COVID-19. We've also had to install additional sanitizing dispensers and signage to make sure that we're all following social distancing and that we're maintaining a clean environment, and we're cleaning a lot more often than we did in the past. What clean was in the past and what clean is today are two entirely different cleans. The implementation of effective social distancing to help prevent the spread of the virus within the workplace. So it's important now that we have, our workstations are properly distanced. We're not overcrowding. We have to wear a safety mask, our safety shields, if that's what you're wearing, but at the very minimum, you have to wear your mask. And so the manufacturing industry, just like any other industries, had to invest and make heavy investments into making sure that they can provide a safe workplace and that they can ensure workers are social distancing and that the workstations aren't as close together as they were. There's a minimum 6 feet distance between each employee in the workplace. And that takes a lot of ingenuity, because you have to replan your floor. You have to make sure, you may have to expand and use a different room. You may have to order new equipment that you maybe hadn't planned for. I mean, there's so many things that to ensure the safety of the employees that as employers, we've had to invest a huge amount of money in. And we had to develop protocols for decontaminating the machinery. Everything has to be cleaned more often, and that needed to be implemented into the processes at work. So it's also disrupted the supply chain. The supply chain has experienced delivery delays. For example, an electronics industry survey revealed that there were more than two-thirds of the respondents were told to expect delays. And while the average quoted delay was like 3 weeks, 15% of the responders were quoted delays of 6 weeks or more. So really, COVID-19 has really impacted the supply chain, because not only was there not enough product out there, the product, the stockpiles went low, and then the suppliers couldn't keep up with the demand. So the demand tripled or increased tremendously. And so as a result, manufacturers weren't able to get the supplies they needed to deliver to their customers. And so it just impacts not only the manufacturer, but it impacts the manufacturer's ability to meet the customer expectations. And it can have an impact on it financially. You could lose customers. There's also increased costs for the supply chain, because prices have increased in how we get the product to the manufacturer, especially if it's something that's in high demand and you need it yesterday. Now you're going to pay double if you need it extra fast, let alone the fact that you may not even be able to get it as quickly as you were able to get it in the past. And then there's uncertainty with the scale of the global economic slowdown. It's still unknown, what tomorrow's going to bring. We don't know when the pandemic is going to be over. We don't know when those things are going to, what does normal mean? When are we going to get back to what was normal? I think our normal is going to change. And as manufacturers, we're going to have to change with that normal. And so one positive sign is that China has they have their outbreak under control and they're getting their factories back into production. And once those factories are back into production, but then you still have to worry about the shipping and the receiving and getting it over here and getting it over here to the United States and then getting it onto the shelves for the, from the manufacturers. So there's still so much uncertainty as to delivery, cost, and what is going to be the new normal. There's been an impact on equipment, whether manufacturers are increasing capacity or adjusting production in response to the demand. These changes can have a major impact on equipment performance. If you're using equipment that's a little bit older, it may not be able to keep up. If you need to buy new equipment to keep up, you may not be able to get that equipment as quickly as you need it to be able to keep up with the demand. So it's the equipment impact, and then maintaining that equipment, the maintenance and repair on that equipment, because you're using it, the demand is so high that you're using it more often than you had planned. So equipment breakdowns are affecting the manufacturing process, and being able to keep the equipment up and running so that you can meet the customer needs on a timely basis. Manufacturers are increasing capacity or adjusting production in response to demand. These changes have a major impact on equipment performance, maintenance schedules and practices, and the ability to meet demand in a timely manner, especially in the case of medical equipment, because people's lives are depending upon it, and getting that medical equipment to the hospitals in a timely manner and identifying supply chains to be able to do that has been quite a challenge. Supply shortages and increased prices. Until the affected factories resume full production, manufacturers will need to rely on inventory stockpiles. And those stockpiles are limited and they will run out eventually. And as existing inventory runs dry, we can expect to see shortages and or price increases throughout the supply chains if alternate sources are not secured. We're going to experience fulfillment delays. COVID-19 quarantine, travel restrictions, and workforce shortages can make it difficult and impossible for impacted manufacturers to fulfill their contractual obligations to their customer. We see that now. When we go into stores, we see, the shelves are half empty. They haven't received their delivery. They're not even able to sell the product that they have for sale or advertise for sale. It's a tripling and it's a rippling effect, and it affects everybody right down to the consumer when the manufacturers can't meet their commitments to their customers. There's increased, COVID-19 has caused increased transportation costs. Factories can resume production, but they're likely going to need things in a hurry. And you know how it goes when you need things in a hurry. You have to pay to receive it in a hurry, and those prices have gone up. Not only have regular freight prices gone up, but if you need something, if shipped to you rush, that price has gone up. It's doubled or almost doubled in price to be able to get something quickly so that you can meet your consumer demands. Reputational impact. The way manufacturers respond to COVID-19 delays or shortages will be an important dimension of long-term brand presentation. And that is, that has happened, and it is happening, because it does affect your brand. When you can't meet your contractual obligations, it affects your brand. It affects your reputation with that customer. You made a promise to the customer. And so even though you may not have control over the supply and demand, you may not have control over the supply chain issues, you may not have control over, freight issues and getting it on time. And your customer may not even be understanding, even though they may understand that that COVID-19 has an impact, they still want their product on time. They still expect us to meet their customer expectations on time. So it's important. It's important to, get these things on time. So we want to protect our reputation as much as possible. The virus it could last 2 years or longer. They anticipate that we'll be back somewhat normal in July, September, something like that. But what if a second surge happens? What if, they're predicting, with the holidays that we could have another surge? And if that happens, that's only going to delay it even further. So, geographic diversification and supply chains have an impact on that. So we have to preserve our company's reputation as much as possible. But COVID-19 has impacted our ability to meet the consumer demand, and that can hurt our reputation. One of the ways that we can overcome is through supply chain planning, and through geographic diversification is one way. The coronavirus is the latest proof that manufacturers need to revisit their sourcing strategies and consider reducing dependence on China or any other major location. And many manufacturers are already having, conversations as a result of what's gone on in the last couple of years with the trade policy disruptions. And they're looking more locally for suppliers so that they can meet their demands, so they can meet their customer expectations. So you want to diversify geographically. You don't want to get everything from one general location. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So you need, the suggestion is that you diversify your geographic locations and you have product coming from different places, looking at local suppliers who can deliver much more quickly so that you can meet consumer demand. An increase in visibility. Technologies such as cargo tracking, automated warehousing, cloud-based GPSs and RFID introduce increased visibility into nearly every part of the supply chain. Surprise disruptions, which used to occur in supply chain blind spots, meaning areas where the companies don't even realize supplies traveled, are less common as a result. So, by capitalizing on these technologies and increasing their real-time visibility in every part of the supply chain, companies can more proactively identify areas of potential risk prior to an issue happening. So, you want to be able to have those alternatives and those alternative sourcing venues in play so that if this happens again, you don't have to worry about, you have a backup plan, you know what you're going to do moving forward. Yes. So the supply chain, you want to review your insurance coverage to make sure that it covers you for communicable, you have a communicable disease exclusion, because that can make a difference on being able to, your insurance company can cover some of that loss if you have that exclusion. But without it, then you would be in a situation where you just have to count it as a loss. So always revisit your insurance and make sure that you're covered every way possible. Especially, looking what we've been through here in the last year with COVID-19, making sure your insurance policy covers you for any future instances that may occur. Engineer resilience and introduce agility for the future. The best opportunity for lasting change is mitigation measures, making sure those things are in place. And you should consider how they might re-engineer your supply chain to be more resilient by design, factoring in increased complexity and uncertainty as the new normal. So you can plan better, you want to plan for these complexities. You want to be able to plan for things, the what if this happened, what if that happens. You want to be able to have a backup plan or a plan in place so that when this happens, then you can kick into gear and it will have a minimal impact on the manufacturing operation. We have to think more globally. We have to think more widely now. I think COVID-19 has taught us that we can't take things for granted. We can't just assume it's just going to fall into place. So we really need to, do some planning to make sure, okay, if this happens, this is what we can do to minimize the impact on the business. Okay, the supply chain itself must be viewed as interconnected, as an interconnected, interdependent network. Truly agile supply chains require end-to-end visibility across the entire ecosystem, relying on real-time data, identifying shifts in demand or disruptions faster, and adapt to sudden changes quicker. COVID-19 has taught us that we need to be more prepared. We need to look at the what if. We can't assume it won't happen to me. COVID-19 has taught manufacturers that we always have to have a backup plan in case we are in this situation again, that we can just go into gear. I think one of the things that I was involved in, I experienced 9/11, and one of the things that I noticed when I was in New York, I was going through that situation, is the financial market was prepared for a disaster, because whether people realized it or not, the financial industry had backup plans. They had backup warehouses. They were back up and running within 24 to 48 hours. Many of those financial institutions in New York were back up and running and doing business as normal. They had backup plans. They were prepared for a disaster. So you want to make sure you have a disaster plan in place so that if such a thing happens again, like COVID-19, you can be back up and running and have minimal impact on your manufacturing processes and procedures, so that you can meet your customer demand, so that you can quickly ramp up to meet increased demand. So you want to repurpose your supply chain. You want to identify pragmatic actions for repurposing supply chains to increase both resilience and social responsibility. One of the things that has happened is we've had many manufacturers who, many of the, I'll use the auto manufacturers. Many of those manufacturers in the wake of COVID-19, when they weren't able to manufacture cars, they also repurposed their environment. They repurposed the factory to make masks, to make ventilators, to make the things that were in demand, high demand. They were able to repurpose their equipment. They were able to repurpose their manufacturing environment to be able to supply some of those things that we needed, like those ventilators were very much needed. So then they began to manufacture those so that the United States could meet the demand for the ventilators. So you want to be able to kind of think about what can you do outside of the norm to that will impact your manufacturing business. If you can't produce what it is that you normally produce in an emergency, what else can you do? Repurposing, what else can you add to? We had companies that repurposed and really focused on making those K95 masks. We had manufacturers who repurposed and began to make ventilators and get things in place to get the ventilators, meet the high demand of ventilators. I mean, we have to be able to repurpose. We have to consider how to combine resilience Can you? We have to consider how to combine resilience and responsibility in supply chains to consider, several priorities and to readjust our priorities as an organization. We need to be able to preserve the extended workforce, promote healthy and safe, the well-being of the supply chain workers. You want to be able to support their mental health and emotional needs as well as their physical safety. You want to repurpose your compatibilities and look for ways to repurpose supply chains to help societies manage the urgent challenges of COVID-19. You want to be able to think local, think creatively, and how to redirect the resources to support local communities across the whole supply chain. And you want to be able to secure the supply base, strengthen the security of the supply network to enhance the overall resilience and support areas of the supply base at risk for operational and/or financial disruption. So being able to repurpose your supply chain, able to shift gears in the manufacturing process to meet the high demand will allow manufacturers to stay functioning and stay in business when some of manufacturers had to shut down because COVID-19, it just didn't allow them to continue to work. We also want to respond. We want to respond with confidence and insight. We want to be able to use analytics, automation, and digital platforms and digital twins to model disruption and test our potential responses. We want to be able to learn and evolve. We want to capitalize on once in a generation opportunity to identify points of supply chain failure, their root causes, and how they can be strengthened. And you want to design for resilience. You want to be able to keep planning for investments needed post-crisis, building a core digital infrastructure, including analytics that includes the purposeful and responsible features developed during the pandemic. The pandemic has also opened up different opportunities. I know that it's hit us hard, but it's also opened us up to new ways of doing business. It's allowed us to be more creative and inventive and innovative to come up with ideas on how we're going to be able to move forward, and then how to respond in the future if such a thing happens again. How to respond in the future so that it has minimal impact on manufacturing is the goal. So what is the new normal? The disruption caused by COVID-19 has had severe operational, social, and financial consequences. It's forcing manufacturers to rethink risk management and contingency plans, workforce safety protocols, manufacturing operations, and new ways of working opportunities all at the same time. One of the things that COVID-19 has brought to the surface is telecommuting. Telecommuting has a whole new face on it than it did before COVID-19. And people, have had to work from home, and creating a balance. It's helped create that balance between home and work. And some people have adapted very well to working from home, and it's been a challenge for others. But at the end of the day, from a business perspective in manufacturing, we have robotics, we have different things, that we need to embrace that will help us be able to balance out that well-being balance. Making sure that those people that are working from home can remain productive and be able to do their work efficiently from home during this pandemic. But what's going to happen after the pandemic? Are they going to come back into the workplace? Are they going to still be working from home? You want to be able to start to think about what is the new normal. Are things going to go back to the way that it was, or are we going to have new and more innovative ways for our workforce to work? We need to understand the impact of demand disruptions. Manufacturers are shifting to address opportunities of hypergrowth, canned, shelf staple, and frozen goods, respirators, personal protective equipment. Those things are being repurposed in many manufacturing organizations, and an organization that may not have produced this particular type of product is now producing that type of product. Manufacturers are transitioning and repurposing legacy lines to make new products to support the community, i.e. distillers producing hand sanitizers. And where demand had drastically fallen off and supply chains had been severely disrupted, manufacturers are were slowing or shutting down due to production volume because they couldn't get the product in. Their supply chain broke. And so how do you prevent that from happening in the past? You diversify. You have more than one supply chain. You don't have everything coming from one source from far off. You have local resources that you can pull from, as well as your global resources that you can pull from. And having those things in place minimizes the impact on the manufacturer. And in all scenarios, manufacturers need to rapidly identify products that are most critical for stabilization and growth, shore up associated supply chains, and reconcile the critical skills to meet near-term and future demands. So the skill set of the average manufacturing worker is changing. As we use more automation, as we use more robotics, um, what a person needs to know in manufacturing to work in manufacturing is increasing. The knowledge base, they need to be familiar with robotics. They need to understand, where it used to be more hands-on, working with your hands and making certain things happen. Now we have robotics in place. Now there's automation in place. So now we need to be able to be good at math. We need to, be able to manage these machines. And so the landscape for the manufacturing employee is changing. And so how do you identify who the best worker is going to be? What skills are going to be, what skills is the new next generational worker going to need to have for manufacturing? What is the reputation in manufacturing? How does the community view manufacturing? Do they view it as a very low-end, dead-end type of work? Or do they see it as something where they can manifest it into, is there growth opportunities? And if so, what are those growth opportunities? And so letting people know what the new manufacturing landscape is like for the new generational worker. What's going to attract that next generational worker? Those are things that as manufacturers, we have to be thinking of, because we have to, one, make sure that people understand manufacturing needs. We need to make sure that people understand manufacturing in general. And we need to define what skill set you're going to need your employees to have, your future employees to have, to be able to work in manufacturing. Do I spend money and train the workers that I have? Or do I reach out and find workers that already have that expertise? The skill gap, what is that going to look like? What is it? What type of specific skill that you're doing today, or that may not be, you may not have it right now, but you're going to need it for the future, and are you planning for it? Work with planners to confirm customers and that the market's actual needs are in order with the segment of demand of critical products needed for production and reprioritization. You want to be able to segment operations based on the market outlook, taking into consideration supply chain inputs for customer demographics, geographies, market sales channels, and to decide which production is in high demand and requires repurposing, because you need, that's another big part of it, making sure that you understand what part of the business can be repurposed should it slow down. What can you do to avoid shutting it down or rechanneling it? You want to develop a rapid demand and supply scenario to confirm operational feasibility. Is it going to be feasible? And if it is feasible, what do I need to do as a manufacturer to make sure we can transition quickly to meet the demand? And we want to develop a roadmap for the next wave of in-demand changes and product needs. We want to have workforce flexibility. COVID-19 has created a significant workforce availability, safety, and production challenges. Absenteeism is at its highest. COVID-19, it doesn't have a name on it, so it can hit anywhere, anytime. And it's not something that you can see. So it's just in the air. You don't know who you're coming in contact with that may have it. So these factors will likely cause a decline in productivity. When you don't have everybody on that line and working, it does impact productivity and your ability to meet your customer demand in manufacturing. So we want to ensure health adequacy. We want to ensure social distancing. We want to ensure that people are wearing their masks, and revise skilling for multi-role coverages, making sure you have a cross-functional workforce that can cover where there's a need or new product lines and processes are introduced. A worker first mindset requires meeting distancing protocols and unique personal proactive equipment requirements for the safety of the workers and their families. Workers are looking to their leadership to support them in staying healthy and productive. Our pragmatic human resilience recommendations are designed to help companies keep the trust of the workforces by addressing not only their physical safety, but also the mental well-being and the need to stay connected with coworkers. That's so critical. Regardless of the fact that we may have technology has taken a huge step and has reduced the need for so many workers, it's still a people business. And so we still have to remember that we need these workers to provide a service to our organizations, and how we treat them is, that is a big issue today. That's an issue that maybe in the past, people didn't worry about it too much, but today workplace safety is an issue for the new next generational workforce. Workplace safety, that work-life balance, making sure that there are growth opportunities. So you have to take care of your employees, and employees are taking notice of employers who are actually taking those next steps to make sure that the employees are taken care of. They're taking note of the ones who are doing it, and they're taking notes of the ones that are not doing it. And if you're not putting your employees first, and if you're not providing that workplace work balance that's needed, that quality of life balance that people are looking for, and you're not making their safety a number one priority, then that'll hurt your reputation as an organization, and it makes it difficult for you to be able to identify and hire and retain good employees. We want to continue to look at workforce flexibility. We want to develop flexible staffing levels to accommodate production ramp-ups and slowdowns. We want to be able to optimize schedules, taking into account social distancing requirements and additional time to allow workers to follow new personal health processes, making sure the equipment's maintained, making sure that they're sanitizing and themselves with, cleaning their hands, and that they are making sure the equipment is sanitized for the next person that comes behind them. Implementing a remote working policy that balances safety and business continuity, which includes actions in response to the cases of confirmed COVID-19 exposure. Can they do some of what they were doing at work remotely? And if they can, are you allowing them to do it remotely? Implementing new safety practices on site, including sanitizing options in more locations, health checks before entering sites, and revising transport and plant processes and canteen schedules to maintain social distancing between workers. Sometimes you have to, re-engineer the schedule to make sure that you don't have as many people working at one time, to ensure social distancing, to ensure that people aren't too clustered together. Are you, providing, those plastic pieces in between the workstations to ensure, that people are safe and they have the least amount opportunity to be exposed to the COVID-19 or any other pandemic for that matter. You want to be able to accelerate deployment of head mounting displays, mobile devices to supplement on-site skill sets with remote access to off-site specialists and personnel where collaboration is needed. Tablets are one thing that's being utilized in manufacturers more often to allow access to individuals that may be located off-site, may be located remotely. Um, you have to create that balance, and then you want to re-engage underutilized employees and transformational initiatives. You want to develop opportunities for your staff with other business units requiring additional capacity. You want to work together. You can, maybe you can move people to a different department that has a higher demand. You want to make sure that your employees know that you're considering them when you're making those decisions before laying them off, because that in the future can have an impact on your ability to recruit and retain good workers. You want to ensure the manufacturing ecosystem viability. There's so many things involved in manufacturing. You have your people, you have your safety measures, you have so many different things going on. So you want to confirm that there's a confirm that critical supply from the main and secondary sources can accommodate the demand, whatever that demand is, for product mix changes, staff changes, you want to be able to determine if supply price points and delivery lead times, do they need to be changed? Do they need to be adjusted? You want to be able to assess whether co-manufacturing alliance partners and your extended ecosystem are still viable options. Things change. People, whatever the original agreement was, whatever they could provide before, maybe now that COVID-19 is in play, they're not able to provide you with that. So you don't want to get caught blindsided. So you always want to make sure what's available within your ecosystem. What's your plan B? What's your plan C? You want to be able to reach out to major contractors to support the sites and understand the measures that they're putting in place to enable a safe work practice. And any adjustments in those processes which may need to be established, or any new requirements. You want to look at your manufacturing environment, and you want to look to see what it is that you can do to ensure that everybody is safe and that it is a safe working environment. You want to be able to determine which market delivery routes are a priority, and if a third party or the logistical providers are available. Do you need to reach out to different sources to continue to serve through those routes? And if not, secure alternative interim carriers. Always have a backup plan. Don't just depend on one source. I think that is the one thing COVID-19 has taught all of us in manufacturing. We need to have more than one resource. And we want to review contracts to determine if any obligations need to be changed in light of the current situation. And you want to address those issues up front. Don't wait for those issues to address you. You want to address those issues up front and make sure that everybody's clear on what you can do and what you can't do, and what you can deliver and what you can't deliver, and that you understand, what part of your ecosystem is changing, and what part of the delivery process is changing, and what part of the ecosystem needs to be adjusted to ensure you can meet the demand to your consumer. You want to rebalance your physical production network assets. You want to be able to analyze the demand and product mix of the workforce and the ecosystem to identify critical equipment issues, critical facility issues, anything that may need to be adjusted to make sure the process is efficient. For non-critical assets, you want to explore repurposing where possible and right sizing where necessary. You want to conduct a network analysis of critical and non-critical assets to develop right sizing hypothesis. You want to be able to identify capital and value implications of validated right sizing ideas that you're thinking of incorporating. You want to balance asset decisions against long-term needs to increase future flexibility. And you want to create living network models that can be leveraged to determine future asset actions or process improvement options. And you want to leverage your digital capabilities. You want to assess key capabilities for building manufacturing resilience. This includes, but it's not limited to, data-driven analytics and scenario simulation modeling, advanced network analysis, mobile and remote worker enablement, remote operation centers, ecosystem relationships and collaboration, and physical automation and robotics. You want to make sure that you're leveraging your compatibilities to ensure that you can meet your demand. And if when you analyze your digital compatibilities, make necessary adjustments to ensure you can meet your demand. You want to be able to envision, design, and implement a digital strategy that will increase flexibility, reliability, sustainability, and value for both base and disrupted operations. And lastly, you want to deploy digital solutions that build resilience. Be willing to start small with a pilot, scale quickly, and deploy across your entire network. So as we move into the future, the COVID-19 pandemic will have long-lasting implications for the future of manufacturing. It has clearly highlighted the pressing need for businesses to build greater responsibility, agility, responsiveness, and resilience in their manufacturing operations. All manufacturers need to look closely at their end-to-end operations to assess how well positioned they are to respond to future disruptions with greater confidence and speed. This means taking a hard look at existing operating models, where and how work gets done, and challenging legacy ways for working, and building in much more transparency and intelligence across the core dimension of the workforce, ecosystem partners, and the physical production network. For most, there remains work to be done to reshape themselves into a digitally enabled, resilient, and agile organization that can quickly adjust in the face of adversity. The present challenge is an opportunity to learn, evolve, and reshape manufacturing for the future. I want to thank you. Do we have any questions?
Okay, thank you, Patrice. It looks like we have one question. We did have some comments here, but I will be sharing these slides. We'll be posting it to our Grow Manufacturing Initiative YouTube channel. We'll be posting the link on our website as well under previous events. But it looks like one of the questions we have here says, we are already flexible with schedules and absenteeism. What other examples of flexibility do you think will increase retention? And I believe you had a slide that went over these as well.
Right. And the thing is, you're dealing with people, and you could have a lot of flexibility. And I think the most important thing is to remain open to trying new things, because with people, there's always going to be new things that you can do. I think it's important that you understand your workforce and you understand your limitations, and that you're doing the most that you can do to for your employees. And once you've done that and you've met that, then it's just a matter of how flexible can you go. Because at some point you may have to just say, I'm sorry, we can't do this. But be open to new things, because I am a believer in that there's always a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. But it depends upon your organization and the limitations that you're working with as to whether or not you can meet those expectations.
Perfect. Okay, so it looks like we still have 10 minutes here. We can either end early here. I can say some final closing statements. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Patrice?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. So thank you all for joining us. And just to reiterate that CMTC is a nonprofit, privately held consultant and training organization that works with small to mid-sized manufacturers, in providing direct support to manufacturers negatively impacted by COVID-19, so they can assist with workplace safety, marketing, satisfying PPE needs, social distancing in the plant, risk management, and much more. Feel free to email me or Liz if you'd be interested in meeting with the CMTC expert consultant. Again, I'll be posting this video and I'll be sharing Patrice's information as well if anyone has any further questions. Again, thank you for joining us, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you, Patrice.
Thank you.